I read on average about 80 books a year, and whenever that comes up, I usually get one of two questions. How do I have time to read that much? And also, how do I afford it? Because books do be expensive. Today, I'm gonna walk you through my updated reading routine / reading system. This is a method that I've really refined over the last decade plus to help me get more consistent with my reading. But before we dive in, I do wanna note that this video is not intended to push you to read dozens or hundreds of books. That is not the standard. That's not what makes you a real reader. I'll deep dive more into that in a little bit, but this is really just to hopefully provide you some ideas or inspiration for finding whatever system of reading works for you if you want to make it more consistent in your life, or if you're already a reader, maybe just wanting to get some new ideas for your own reading system. I think passion is always driven by a strong why, and when I think about why I love reading so much, I think about the fact that it is one of the most intimate forms of art, at least I think there is. It is, the act of getting to experience a new world, a new story, a new set of characters through the perspective of one character, or in the case of nonfiction, one person. And you are seeing it through their complete filter based on their past experiences, so the things that they've gone through that have shaped who they are, their personality, what they think about the world. Again, this applies for both fiction and nonfiction. And you're getting intimate access to someone's thoughts. And this is not something that you always get in film or TV. Sometimes you get like voiceovers of inner monologues, but a book, you get to see all the nitty gritty, the good thoughts, the bad thoughts. What I find interesting with fiction in particular, and that's why I think fiction reading is so important, even though it may not seem as studious as nonfiction, is because you have experiences when you are reading fiction where you're reading from usually one character's POV, but then there are times where you get dual POV or multiple POVs and you get to go into the shoes of other characters. And those moments are always really illuminating because you realize quickly that what you seem to understand with one character can be flipped entirely by another character's perspective, because they may have info that one character is not privy to. They have a different interpretation of how certain events played out. To me, there's such a good life lesson there, because just because you think someone else is a side character in a story doesn't mean that they are the side character in their story. We're all operating as if we're the main character, and that can really help simplify your understanding of different actions that people make, or the way people interpret things, how they understand the world, because they are operating it from their lens. And books have taught me a lot about that lesson, and I feel like it's had real impact on how I process the world around me, which I'm really grateful for. Even in the case of nonfiction, whether it's a memoir or something more topic based, I always think about the fact that this author of that book has poured so much of their wisdom, their top tier wisdom, into those pages, because I just think that's the attitude that people have when they are trying to write a good nonfiction book. And how lucky are we to have access to all of that wisdom in on average 300-ish pages. I think the internet has done so many incredible things for reading, and I think the main one is just building community. I remember when I was younger, BookTube was where I found that community, because otherwise reading is a very individual hobby to embark on. There's no one that can read the book for you. But the flip side to this is I feel like there is a lot of consumption around the topic about books online. There's a lot of emphasis on how many books people have read, how many books they want to read, big reading goals, how fast they're reading a book. And even I am guilty of it in today's video by emphasizing how many books I read every year, because I'm using this as myself, or why you should watch this video and click on it, because this is a reader, so maybe she's got some unique things to say. But I think it's definitely something that can make it seem as if this is something we all need to aspire to do. And if you're not reading books quickly, if you're not reading tons of books, it's just not as impressive, and thus why should you do it? And that is just no. Even if you just read one book a year, you are still a reader, and it is still definitely worth doing. The thing is, we all have different contexts for our lives, right? We all have different priorities for how we want to spend our time, or what responsibilities we have. Some people that you see online talk about books, that's their only job is to talk about books online, and they're maybe potentially full-time as a creator. I feel like there's more and more of that, especially in 2025, and they get to spend time as their job reading. So that's something to consider. There's also some books that can be a little bit easier on the palate, the brain palate than others. You know, a contemporary rom-com book is going to be a lot simpler to get through than a dense fantasy novel or a dense medical nonfiction book, because like there's a lot of terms and words and things that you don't really understand. So that's also important to consider into how that factors into someone's speed of reading. And then also I think reading is something that you do get better as you do more of it. It's a muscle that you have to work. So I've been reading for about 18 years of my life. It's just been many, many years of daily reading. Like I feel like I seldomly go a day without reading, and that has just made it so that things click really fast in the brain, and there's a little bit of speed reading that gets factored in there too. I was actually watching back an old reading routine video where I talked about how I choose which book to read next, and I think I said something along the lines of like I use Amazon's top charts and Indigo's top bestseller charts as like a good starting point. And these days I really don't do that. I get a lot of my book recommendations from the internet, a lot of mine from TikTok, but like all places on the internet. I think what I've really grown to like about TikTok specifically is that it's really easy to find super specific book recommendations. If you are someone who loves like the show Bridgerton, you can go on TikTok and be like, books for people who love Bridgerton. And there are tons of recommendations from people that are sharing those types of reads, or like incredible books to read in your 20s. There's going to be a good plethora of books there. I found like some really great nonfiction recommendations through those kinds of searches. If you're a new to reader, I feel like that just unlocks the doors to really find books that already are attached to maybe other interests that you have, which can be a good like stepping stone. Even as like a seasoned reader, sometimes you're just looking for something with a certain vibe or feeling, like books that are gonna make me wanna cry or books that wanna make me wanna laugh. I love like just the search bar in TikTok for that, because you can get those like very hyper-focused book recommendations. So that's always fun. I feel like with fiction, people tend to have a more intuitive understanding of like when they might be interested or not interested in a book. But with nonfiction, people can often just want to read more nonfiction in their life without knowing exactly what they want to read about. And then like I feel like you can get caught up in going to just like the bestsellers, the top Amazon chart titles. Thing is, if you don't really care about that topic that nonfiction book is discussing, even if it's by an author that is really impressive or it has a lot of value in it, it's going to be such a struggle to attack that. Like I equate it to having to take a class in school that is mandatory that you don't really want to take, but you have to do it to get your diploma. It just instantly gives me like student trauma. So with nonfiction, I actually feel like you have to ask yourself, what are topics that I'm actually interested in? Are there people that I really admire that I'd love to learn more from? What are the things I want to work on this year, and how can I find a book that kind of helps me get there? When there's alignment there with nonfiction, it's just so fascinating to read, because everything that you're learning is so relevant to you and actionable. And that's when I feel like nonfiction feels the most exciting, is when you're ready to get like started on some of the things that you're doing in your real life. You're ready to like use those tools. So I've committed to reading, I've chosen the book that I want, and now it's time to actually acquire the book. What am I acquiring? How am I acquiring it? Well, there's always three options in front of me. There's a physical book, an ebook, and an audiobook option. In the past, I've talked about how my stance on buying physical books has been, if I really love the author, I'll buy it in physical books because chances are I'll want to keep that in my collection. Or usually nonfiction I'll like to buy in a physical form because I like to do lots of annotating. My stance has kind of changed in the past couple years though, because look at me, it's 2025, we're past the halfway point, and I've only bought 4 physical books. I'd say 2 out of the 4 of them are ones that I kind of regret buying in physical copy. I wish I had just gotten them through ebook or Libby. They are Dream Girl Drama. This is one that I wish I would have just gotten on ebook. The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. This one I'm glad I got in physical copy. I got it at HomeSense for a good price. It's a good coffee table flip through kind of book. Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, which typically I'd say is a no-brainer. Gotta buy it in physical copy. This one made me think, maybe I could have just gotten it in ebook. And I like this one. I always love an Emily Henry read, but I may not be feeling as compelled to buy the physical book anymore. And then Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, which I did get in physical copy because I have the other books in physical copy, and that is really hard to break. I can't have an unfinished series on my bookshelf. So, you know, you do the math. If I read 80 books a year, this gets crazy. And cost aside, even though I dream of like having my own home library where I see all my books on shelves and stuff, that's not where I'm at. So the physical space in this apartment is at capacity. Ebooks tend to be the one that I gravitate towards. I do have two e-readers, as we know, a Kobo Libra Color and a Kindle Paperwhite. This is an older Paperwhite version. So then I have to decide which one am I reading off of? And there is logic here. So I'm gonna walk you through. Get ready, strap in. First question I asked myself, is it on Kindle Unlimited? Kindle Unlimited is a subscription service where I'm able to have, I think, 20 books on my Kindle. And of any book that's part of Kindle Unlimited, you can like swap in and out those 20 books. So if it's on there, easy peasy. It's like having access to unlimited reading. So that's the move. If it's not on Kindle Unlimited though, then I ask myself, is it on Libby? Libby is the app that I use to connect with the Toronto Public Library, and it can connect with tons of public libraries, so you can look into it and see if yours is on there. Libby is what allows me to borrow ebooks from my local library. I've been using this so much more in the past couple of years, and even for new releases where you think, oh, there's going to be a huge wait list to get on before you can read them, I will set calendar dates in my phone, reminders in my phone to go on Libby on the date of release or the day after release and get myself on the wait list. And then that makes the wait times like pretty minimal, if there is one at all, because sometimes I'm like really on top of it. If it's not on Libby, then I ask myself, is it for sale on Kobo? Because if an ebook is on sale on Kindle and Kobo, I will opt for Kobo, because when I buy the book on Kobo, I actually get the file, the ebook file that I can read on other devices other than just my Kobo. Now there's been a change in the way Kindle handles things, and you are simply buying a license to read a book on a Kindle device. So you can't take that ebook to another device. So if I'm gonna spend the money, I'd rather get the full ownership of the file. But if it's not available on Kobo, I buy it on Kindle. So it's like this whole web of like questions I go through. It sounds intricate, but like it's automatic in my system of doing things. But you know, this is like an important thing to consider, because this is how I keep the costs of my reading addiction. Cause like maybe at this point, 80 books a year, it's kind of like addict levels. It keeps it manageable, very manageable. Now the times I choose audiobooks are typically for nonfiction, because they're just a great thing to have on in the background when I'm doing walks around the city, and I do a lot of walking. And again, like I typically get my audiobooks now from Libby, because you can also borrow audiobooks, which is great. And I love it too, because like audiobooks are not something that I typically revisit in the same way I would an ebook or a physical book. So being able to get that from the library is a huge bonus. And I feel more willing to gamble on a title too if I'm not putting money behind it. But I've also been adoring graphic audio novels. These are very specific novels, typically done for select fantasy series, where every character is narrated by a different cast member. There's sound effects. It's very immersive. I need to tackle the rest of the Crescent City books. So I'm going to be doing that through, I think, graphic audio novels. And also, if you want to listen to like examples of what I'm talking about, there's lots of clips on TikTok too, just so you can kind of get a taste of what those types of narrations are like. I read about 65 books this year, so I got curious, how much have I spent on my reading this year so far? On Libby or books from the library, it was obviously $0. 7 months of Kindle Unlimited equated to about $83. The purchased ebooks I've done this year is about $45. And the amount I've spent on physical books was around $100. So that brings us to $228 divided by 65 equals about $350 per book that I read, which doesn't feel too bad. Just goes to show that if you are paying attention, you can really find ways to save costs with this hobby, even if you are someone who reads tons and tons of books. But even if you are someone who opts more for physical books, you can get stuff at thrift stores, at used bookstores, at HomeSense. HomeSense has really modern or current titles on shelves for a fraction of the price elsewhere. Borrow books from a friend. You may think that I spend every spare moment of free time reading, and I do love to opt for, you know, an afternoon of reading on a weekend. But honestly, I feel like a majority of the reading that I do, a majority of these like 65 books I do, is through night reading. I go to bed like an hour before my bedtime so I can really soak into the book. I am notorious for on weekends having like late night reading sessions because I get really hooked in. It's just like the best time of day, or I guess night, for me to really just commit to that and do it guilt-free. But I think the key to picking a reading time that allows you to be consistent with it in your life is to find the time of day that it's the most convenient for you to pick up a book. And maybe that's like right in the morning before anyone else in your house wakes up and you can just have some alone time while sipping coffee. Or when you get home from work, you spend like a little bit of extra time in your car, like reading a chapter or something before you get immersed in your to-do list. At this point, I'm not feeling like I need to work on that as a habit. Like I naturally just want to read daily. And if you are someone who's just wanting to bring that habit alive in your life and it's not natural for you to do it, you don't feel like the absence of not reading if you go a couple days without it, then I feel like really just trying to do what you can to get in the routine of it is important. And sometimes like just doing like 10 minutes a day, committing to that, or a chapter a day, setting like a super small goal can be a really great way to just get yourself in the motion of it. How do you feel more immersed in the books that you're reading? I've been thinking a lot about that because again, it comes naturally to me, but there are things I do that I think help make my imagination just feel more vibrant when I'm reading. So one of my best tips is when you are starting a new book, even if you are someone who usually only reads in like 10-minute spurts or like just shorter spurts, commit at least 20 to 30 minutes when you first start a book to diving in. And this applies for fiction and nonfiction. I feel like the beginning of a book is always the most difficult. Definitely like the first 30%. Just spending 20-30 minutes getting into the first couple chapters can get the ball moving so that you don't feel like you're stuck in this, okay, what's this book gonna be about land? Again, both for fiction and for nonfiction, because nonfiction has like this habit of introing for quite a bit. Like those first couple of chapters are a lot of like, this is what we're gonna talk about. And like, I always feel like I need to get past that hump before I'm like, okay, here we go. We're learning something. We're getting to the meat of what we're going to discuss. Even with fiction, like there's new characters, there's a new person that you're being introduced, that you're living life through, and there's new places to see, and you're like, what's the foundation of what's going on? Who is the problem? What are the issues? Just kind of getting into the groove with that really helps minimize some lag that can happen if you're taking your time with the beginnings. I feel like the best imagination happens when you can base some of that imagination or sprout some of that imagination from something real, something that you know to be true. So when it comes to, I know this is gonna sound silly, like floor layouts for a character's home, I always think about their home base, because usually you spend some time in a character's home or apartment or house. I have like these floor plans based on places I've been, or even just like throughout the years, just kind of having a general floor plan for different situations, where if they're in a condo, like there's a specific condo they're going to, and then like I will adapt that floor plan to fit that specific character if certain specificities come up in the details of it, that I'm like, okay, it needs to be a moodier condo, or it needs to be a bright condo, a chaotic maximalist condo, or a minimalist condo, but like the floor plan stays the same so I can like just orient where the characters are. Or like if there's a house, I know that there are a few like house floor plans that I swap between. I know that sounds maybe like super silly, but it's just one of the ways that I find my brain can like better get myself into the story, because I'm not wasting time on like these more insignificant details. I'm just kind of like, okay, this is my set, decorate it how it needs to be, and action, let's go. I'm very curious to know if anyone who reads does something like that with how they read stories. Like I also am someone who never imagines faces for the characters I read. If I really think about it, I don't ever picture someone's face unless like it's a big part of that character, right? Reading alongside playlists that are themed to the book that you're reading. And the first book that comes to mind when I think about this is Fourth Wing, because I was shocked when I discovered on YouTube there was all like these Fourth Wing like environmental audioscapes where like there's a visual with dragons and castles and then like this really like ornate music. And it's weird how like it just, not weird in a actually weird way, but like in a cool way, how it immediately transports you and you're like, yes, let's go into the world of Fourth Wing. Or if you're reading like a romance novel, there's like romance reading playlists. Or if I'm reading like nonfiction that's like health oriented, I like using my Hertz frequency sound. So I think finding audios that align, usually instrumentals, at least that's what I prefer, because I cannot read or focus very well when I'm listening to lyric videos or lyric songs. But having that experience with the audio and then also the visual component on YouTube, because there's some really cool visuals that people add to those videos. It just kind of helps the imagination keep going. Book annotating also really helps you stay engaged with what you're reading. So highlighting things, underlining things, adding little comments. You know, I know people feel a certain type of way about doing this on physical books, but I really love doing this on my Kobo Libra Color because you can highlight in different colors. You can use the stylus to add little notes. It's just a lot of fun to have those details. And then the great thing about an ebook is that you can erase it and it is like it never existed. With nonfiction, I especially love doing this. I actually like taking notes while I'm reading nonfiction because there's usually so many things that I don't want to forget. That added physicality to the reading experience that you otherwise wouldn't get just has a way of keeping you dialed in, or keeping me dialed in, I should say. Once I finish a book, I bring out my red Paper Republic journal. I've shown this journal quite a few times. I want to do like an updated video about me giving it a little bit of a reset for the mid-year point, just like I did for my Filofax. But in here, I have a whole notebook dedicated to my reading log. So I always open this up and add the title of the book that I just read. And usually I'll do a quick star rating and maybe a note or two if I feel inspired to write something about my thoughts. It's just so fun to have these logged in a physical journal. I don't know, I feel like it's so special to kind of flip through. It feels like the most beautiful little scrapbook for me to have. Even though I don't track with Goodreads, one thing I do use it for is when I'm finished a book to go see what other people are saying about it, because I feel like people on Goodreads are a little bit more critical than on other sites, so I can get a little bit of a better understanding of some ideas that people are having or theories that people have. This is another thing that I love using YouTube and TikTok and Instagram for, to see like what people's spoilery thoughts are, especially for series. It adds so much engagement, dialing into the community aspect. It's what makes like watching a TV show or watching a movie so much fun, is when you get to like talk about it with people who've also seen the same thing that you have. And then when all of that is done, I do it all over again. And then again, and then again, and again, and again. Reading can be fun, but it can also be serious. It can be critical. It can be joyful. It can be an escape from reality or an assessment of reality. Like there's so many paths to take with it. And then we all get to kind of choose our path with reading, but then that path can also shift with us as we crave different things at different moments in our life. Because I know the books I'm reading at 38 are going to be different than the ones I'm reading now at 28. These books I'm reading now at 28 are different than the ones I read at 18, but they've all played a part, a puzzle piece in shaping who I am. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I don't think I'd be the same person if I hadn't read the books that I've read in my lifetime. And it makes me excited to see what changes will be inspired by the future books I read. I'm really curious to know in the comment section down below if you have any unique imagination techniques while reading and what book you are currently reading. This is my favorite topic ever, so I had so much fun filming today's video and hope you enjoyed watching it. I'll see you soon with a new one. Until then, bye guys.